Hello, and welcome to the Data Engineering Podcast, the show about modern data management. Are you tired of dealing with the headache that is the modern data stack? It's supposed to make building smarter, faster, and more flexible data infrastructure a breeze. It ends up being anything but that. Setting it up, integrating it, maintaining it, it's all kind of a nightmare. And let's not even get started on all the extra tools you have to buy to get it to work properly. But don't worry, there is a better way. Time Extender takes a holistic approach to data integration that focuses on agility rather than fragmentation. By bringing all the layers of the data stack together, Time Extender helps you build data solutions up to 10 times faster and saves you 70 to 80% on costs. If you're fed up with the modern data stack, give Time Extender a try. Head over to dataengineeringpodcast.com/timeextender where you can do two things. Watch them build a data estate in 15 minutes and start for free today. Legacy CDPs charge you a premium to keep your data in a black box. RudderStack builds your CDP on top of your data warehouse, giving you a more secure and cost-effective solution. Plus, it gives you more technical controls so you can fully unlock the power of your customer data. Visit dataengineeringpodcast.com/RudderStack today to take control of your customer data. Your host is Tobias Macy, and today I'm interviewing Priyendra Deshwal about how NetSpring is using the data warehouse to deliver a more flexible and detailed view of your product analytics. So, Priyendra, can you start by introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. My name is Priyendra Deshwal. I spent my childhood in India. My father used to work with the federal government. His job used to be moving across cities, and I had the unique experience of living in 7 different cities and attending 8 different schools. Attended college in India, studied computer science at IIT Kanpur, then followed that up with a master's degree here at Stanford, and eventually my first job kind of landed me at Google. One of the things that I kind of experienced early on in coming here was, this whole culture of entrepreneurship, which was very different from what I was used to at India. So that caught my eye. And so then around 2012, joined a bunch of crazy folks who were starting this business intelligence company called ThoughtSpot. Today, ThoughtSpot is hailed as a BI leader by the latest Gartner reports and valued at over $4 billion in their last valuation. While at ThoughtSpot, we kind of saw a gap where the existing products in the ecosystem did not do a great job of analyzing time-oriented event data. And so then in 2019, we started NetSpring to solve that problem. And working with event data since then has eventually led us to this space of warehouse native analytics that we're going to talk about today. Thank you so much for having me, Tobias.
Absolutely. And do you remember how you first got started working in data?
So at Google, my first job there was with the search ranking team. And in many ways, like running a search engine is all about data management. There is a lot of algorithmic aspects to it also, but then there is a lot of just managing data. So I started out pretty early on that front, but my first real exposure to enterprise data management came through my work at ThoughtSpot. I got a very close view into how enterprises are managing, storing, analyzing data, and that was how I got started into it.
And so, in terms of what you're building at NetSpring, can you give a bit of an overview of what the focus is and some of the story behind how it came to be and why you decided that you wanted to spend your time and energy on this particular problem domain?
Of course, yeah. So our team here at NetSpring has combined decades of experience of building and selling BI tools, right? And it turns out that these products are really good at counting numbers and then dividing those numbers into categories and showing reports based on that. But there is a whole different side of analytics that involves ordering events by time. If you want to understand user retention, then you must reconstruct the user's journey through your product by laying out the event that they did over time. And as it turns out, BI tools are really bad at it. So we started with this abstract problem of event-oriented analytics. What does it mean to understand businesses' event data that is being generated more and more now and analyze them? And we built a pretty generic and analytically powerful system, which was very broad and could be adapted to a fair number of use cases. And it turned out that warehouse native product analytics was the killer app for this platform. And now we're going full throttle at that problem.
And in terms of the category of product analytics, I'm wondering if you can just give a bit of an overview about the types of activities and requirements that are involved and some of the roles and teams that are going to take part in the overall exercise of collecting and creating and utilizing those product analytics.
Of course, of course. So the goal of product analytics is to build a deep understanding of how users are using your product and to use that understanding then to impact any number of high level metrics such as user engagement, retention, conversion, revenue, and so forth, right? And the primary tool that these products use to understand user behavior is in product telemetry. So this telemetry, which is usually in the form of some instrumentation that you add that allows you to track events by users over time, allows you to build a very accurate history of what a user has done in the product. And then you can use these behaviors to say, okay, I want the users to do X, but they are not doing it because they are doing Y, or they are failing at some earlier step that they need to cross before they can get to X. And all of that analysis is broadly bucketed under the product analytics umbrella. The stakeholders involved are obviously the engineering teams are usually responsible for putting the instrumentation because the instrumentation lives inside the product. The data teams are responsible for making sure that these events and this telemetry that is produced is reliably moved from the user's browser into whatever destination. In warehouse product analytics, that destination ends up being the customer's warehouse. And obviously, then the analyst and the product teams are responsible for mining this repository of data for the kinds of insights that can guide product decisions and business decisions.
And when teams first come to what you're building at NetSpring, I'm wondering what you see as some of the common challenges that they are facing and some of the ways that they have tried to address those issues prior to deciding that NetSpring is the solution that they need.
Product analytics as a category was really invented late around 2010, right? That is when products like Amplitude and Mixpanel came around. These first generation products, they are built on a architecture that requires customers to ship data to a third party applications. And these companies, in the decade since they've been founded, they've done a really good job of evangelizing the need for product analytics. Today, when we walk into an account, it's not like we are trying to convince people that you need product analytics. Rather, the conversation that we are having is the problems that come with this first generation architecture. How can we solve them? And that is where NetSpring comes in. So the main challenges that we see are these systems are very expensive. The part of the cost comes because it's a complete vertically integrated, siloed third-party system that does everything from ingestion to storage to compute to the analytics on top. So they are quite expensive. The second concrete challenge we see is that these systems do not have access to the entire enterprise data repository. Typically, we see customers only send a very small fraction of their enterprise data to these third-party systems. And as a result, the insights that you can generate in these systems is limited. And then finally, there is the underlying question of like poor governance. In today's world with so much sensitivity around data and governance, it's increasingly difficult for customers to reconcile sending such sensitive data over the wire to third-party systems. And we've seen that people just want more control of their data. So these three things, the cost, the access to only a fraction of the repository of data of your enterprise data, and the poor governance aspects of this architecture that make a solution like NetSpring attractive to these customers.
And another interesting layer to this is the fact that you mentioned things like Mixpanel and Amplitude that are very distinctly a SaaS platform where you send all of your data to that service. You use their instrumentation for being able to collect the different events that you're trying to track. And another, product category, or at least a term that people use, is the idea of a customer data platform, which platforms such as Segment helps to popularize. And I'm wondering if you can provide some distinction between this idea of customer data platform and warehouse native product analytics.
So, one way to think about this is customer data platform is kind of a broader play where you are collecting a bunch of data sets and then using it for multiple use cases. The primary one that most people use it for is product analytics, which is trying to understand how people are using their product. But you could also imagine experimentation, A/B testing, and other kind of workflows built on top of that same data. So in many ways, like this customer data platform plays. I mean, you can think of it as a special purpose warehouse, which is designed around the needs of customer data. What I've seen is that this idea might have made sense a decade back when warehouse technology, like general purpose warehouse technology, hadn't caught up. But in today's world, I don't see the need for a separate customer data platform. From my perspective, the advice I would give to people who are thinking about modern data architectures is to put enterprise warehouse at the center of your customer data strategy and not rely on a separate customer data platform.
And then circling back to your mention of things like data governance and some of the regulatory requirements around data, particularly in light of the GDPR and CCPA legislations, I'm wondering what you see as some of the challenges involved in bringing this idea of product analytics and the collection and distribution of that information into an enterprise or highly regulated environment or industry, particularly in things like finance or healthcare.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. The main challenge, so these regulatory regimes that have come up over the last few years, they pose a big problem for any architecture that requires data to be shipped over to a different destination that is not under the control of your organization. Doesn't mean that people don't do it. I think the problem of product analytics is important enough that if there is no solution, people will find a way to justify it and get it to work. But now we have a way, and I think increasingly going forward, we'll find fewer and fewer organizations opting to send their data over.
And we've been talking a little bit around this topic of the fact that there are a number of different players in this space of product analytics, both commercial and open source, and there are different generational shifts that have happened around that. And I'm wondering if you can give your perspective on the role that NetSpring plays in that ecosystem and maybe some of the cases where it serves as a replacement for a different technology, and then also the cases where it is supplemental to other offerings.
Absolutely. So as I noted, right, so NetSpring is a warehouse native product analytics solution. And we deeply believe in this warehouse native vision. So our definition of warehouse native is that no data ever leaves a customer warehouse and no data is ever shared with the third party and no external indices are built to accelerate queries and so on and so forth. So building this kind of system under this constraint has not been easy, as you're perhaps familiar. Product analytic queries, building funnels and visualizing paths of customers, they are not cheap, and there is a lot of secret sauce to how we are able to get such expensive workloads to perform well on a normal data warehouse. But in terms of ecosystem, we squarely sit in the analytics side of it. So we are not, so we are the only truly warehouse native product on the market, and we only focus on product analytics. We are not a CDP, we are not an instrumentation provider. We are a solution that if you have data in the warehouse, you can connect NetSpring on top and very quickly start getting valuable insights back from the system. We partner with instrumentation providers like Segment and RudderStack to get the data in the warehouse to begin with, or rather, our customers use those products to get the data in the right place.
And digging more into the platform that you've built, I'm wondering if you can talk to some of the ways that your implementation is focused on being able to best take advantage of some of the modern warehouse technologies and the associated data stacks that have grown up around those capabilities.
Absolutely. So our software basically flips the first generation product analytic architecture on its head, right? So instead of shipping your data to an amplitude where your compute lives, NetSpring will ship the compute to your data in the form of a SQL query. And the way we do that is Let me go into a little bit of the history of how we built the company, right? So when we first started, we like the gap, as I noted earlier, we identified was that analyzing business data that is produced in the form of events is not a great experience, and that is the problem we started out to solve. And we built an architecture that was quite generic and applicable to a broad category of use cases. And it was only once we saw traction with product analytics that we adapted that architecture to quote unquote warehouse native product analytics. So one of the first things that we did was we took everything that we knew about analytics and distilled that into novel language called NetScript. So NetScript, the best way to think about it is that it's an evolution of SQL that allows us to marry the relational world of BI style analytics with the time oriented world of event oriented analytics. So everything in NetSpring is powered via NetScript. But of course, all of that is under the hood, and users do not need to see NetScript directly, and they don't even need to know anything about it to operate the system. But ultimately, every click in the product, in the NetSpring product, is backed by some kind of underlying NetScript operation. So the first year and a half, we just were building NetScript and refining the language and getting it ready for a broad category of analytical use cases. And what we see today is that effort has paid off handsomely. Like, we have a very rigorous abstraction that sits at the heart of our system, and that abstraction allows us to do things that our other vendors are not even capable of doing. So NetSpring is not some kind of templated SQL generation tool. It's a tool that deeply understands product analytics. It can anticipate what users will do. It can pre-compute things for them so that results are magically available on the fly. It can optimize queries using its understanding of the underlying statistics of the data to, in many cases, be hundreds of times faster than what they would naively be. And all of that secret sauce and magic that makes warehouse native product analytics possible is ultimately the result of our investments into NetScript.
And when you're talking about being able to preemptively or proactively kind of pre-aggregate or pre-render some of the data so that it is already dimensionalized, I'm kind of reading into what you said a little bit, so that when somebody says, oh, I actually want to understand at a more granular level the exact actions that this user took when they were engaging in the product within this specific session, I'm wondering too how you think about some of the cost optimization challenges around some of these cloud native warehouses, particularly in terms of things like BigQuery and Snowflake, where they have different cost models, and you need to be able to be kind of cognizant of the billing constraints that an organization might be trying to focus on, and some of the ways that you are trying to optimize both for the end user experience and for the kind of financial aspects of running one of these systems.
Absolutely. And, this is one of the biggest questions that we get, that, okay, fine, this is a compelling vision, we are seeing some of these same problems around governance and cost, and we would like to do something, but it just seems too far-fetched. Like, how can you deliver a first-class product analytics experience on top of a commodity general-purpose warehouse? And so the answer lies in a lot of behind-the-scenes things that we have done. So, the first principle, I mean, anybody building a data processing system already knows this, but the first principle is, do not look at more data than you absolutely need to in order to answer a question, right? But operationalizing that simple insight into practice is not trivial. So the class of techniques can go anywhere from, like, simple clustering on the warehouse, where you make sure that you can do as much pruning upfront, to very, very advanced pre-aggregations and pre-computations that maybe run once a day, but save you hundreds of minutes of processing time through the rest of the day. And each of those processing times would have build, like, these warehouses are not cheap. So there is a broad class of techniques that make this kind of experience possible. The cost question is a very good one. So big game changer with these modern warehouses is they are built around the idea of elasticity. So if you are using, let's say, Amplitude, and you're sending a certain number of events to them, it doesn't matter. Your billing model does not take into account how much use the system is actually getting. Like you could do one query a day, or you could do hundreds of queries a day, and your cost will be exactly the same. Whereas with in this warehouse world, you are metered on how much you are actually using the system. And by the way, we are not even in the billing path there. The customer is directly paying the warehouse for how much use we are getting. We are only providing the analytical layer on top. And so the first tool to optimize cost we have in our at our disposal is elasticity, right? And then second tool is there is a lot of fine tuning of the size of warehouse that is required, and with BigQuery whether you need slots, and with Snowflake what is the size of warehouse. All those things we carefully work with our customers to tune that. And then finally, it's all about you know working through a specific use case. What I have seen is there is the abstract playbook of very generic data engineering guidelines. Okay, you shard your data well, you do some sampling, all those things, they are generic. But then once you're faced with an actual problem, you can often use your experience to craft a solution for a customer that sits within their cost envelope.
And another aspect of what you're building, since you are operating on top of the data warehouse, is the fact that there's likely to be a high degree of variance across the specific data modeling, the level of data maturity, the types of data professionals that are within an organization. And I'm curious how you are working to simplify across those kind of dimensions of variance and be able to operate on top of these highly customized and highly customizable systems while being able to provide a kind of consistent and cohesive experience across all of your customers.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So there is a lot of variance, you're right. And there is organizational variance, like who does what across different companies. And then there is the data variance, which is, how is data laid out. And then there is the use case variance, which is, for example, retention might mean something different for you versus some other company, right? And so all those different things are there. So I think it's useful to start with the data variance to begin with. So first generation products are built with a very opinionated data model. Their data model says that you have to have a notion of a user, and you have to have a notion of event that is generated by that user, and everything is then follows from that opinionated data model. So it works very well for your typical use case where you are trying to understand, let's say, a shopping cart, and you want to see a funnel which shows how many people are able to successfully go through the workflow of searching for products, adding them to a cart, and checking out. So it works great for that use case. But when you come to a little bit more complicated enterprise, then it's not obvious that that model is the right choice. Like, for example, consider a company like, I don't know what is a good example. Let's take a DocuSign, for example, right? DocuSign, does it mean that, there is users who are progressing through funnels, but there is also documents that are progressing through a funnel. A document is created, then they are signed by the first party, second party, and so on and so forth, and finally they are executed, right? And so how do you fit something like that into the rigid data model of these first generation products? So our answer to that problem is that you don't have to fit. One of the benefits that we get is that we are built on top of NetScript, which itself is built on top of SQL. So NetScript compiles to SQL, right? And so therefore, we have the full richness of the underlying relational data model with all its associated joins and capabilities to join disparate data sets together. All of that richness is available to us. So we are not opinionated when it comes to what data model we are forcing on our customers. But obviously, it's like all of that chaos in the data model, it can't be shown to the user, right? So what we do is we've kind of settled across two concepts. One is the concept of an event stream, and second is the concept of an actor. An actor is something like a user, but it could be a document, it could be anything that is going through some workflow. And event stream is the collection of events that that actor is generating over time. So in NetSpring, you can have multiple event streams, you can have multiple actor types, and you can seamlessly say, okay, show me a funnel of documents that are dropping off because two people are signing, but the third one is not. Or show me the funnel of users who are able to log on to my website and sign up for a premium account, but then they don't use the product and churn a year later. So all of those things are possible because we have a very generic relational model at the lowest level, and we allow users to bring their data, and the product adapts to the customer's data model as opposed to the other way around.
Join in with the event for the global data community, Data Council Austin. From March 28th to 30th, 2023, they'll play host to hundreds of attendees, 100 top speakers, and dozens of startups that are advancing data science, engineering, and AI. Data Council attendees are amazing founders, data scientists, lead engineers, CTOs, heads of data, investors, and community organizers who are all working together to build the future of data. As a listener to the Data Engineering Podcast, you can get a special discount of 20% off your ticket by using the promo code DataEngPod20. Don't miss out on their only event this year. Visit dataengineeringpodcast.com/data-council today. And another interesting aspect of being warehouse native is that the customer has to have that warehouse before they can really make use of NetSpring, whereas in the initial approach to product analytics, those companies were trying to be the all-in-one solution of, you don't have to have anything, just drop this piece of JavaScript in here and then we'll do everything for you. It's magic. And I'm wondering what your broad conception is of the kind of level of data maturity that an organization should be at to be able to make best use of NetScript, and maybe some of the ways that you have worked to ease the on-ramp so that for companies who maybe haven't invested a lot in their data platform or are just starting to implement a data warehouse or able to get up to speed with being able to generate product analytics and useful insights from what NetSpring is offering without having to hire a whole suite of new data professionals or a whole new team.
Yep, absolutely. So the broad answer to that is that NetSpring as a product analytics solution is usable by companies across all scales. So it's not that startups cannot find value from NetSpring and only big companies do and so forth. But that said, our observation has been that people who are feeling one of those three pains, either I already talked about this earlier, like either they are troubled by the cost of operating these systems, or they are troubled by the fact that only a sliver of data is accessible to product analytics, but the vast majority is not, or poor governance. If they're feeling these three kinds of pains or some subset of them, they're more likely to be more receptive to a product like NetSpring. So what we've seen is, in terms of good fit for working with us, if you have a warehouse and that warehouse already has events, that is a perfect starting point for us. If that is not the case, we can help you get started, and we can smoothen the process of going through that journey. But ultimately, as I noted earlier, we are not an instrumentation company, and we don't take ownership of that part of the problem.
You've discussed this a little bit as far as some of the journey that you've gone on from the idea of NetScript or the idea of NetSpring to where you are today. But what are some of the other ways that the broader goals and implementation of the platform have evolved from when you first started working on it?
So the goals of the platform, it was not like an evolution of the goals. I would frame it more as us learning what the goal should be. Some companies are formed with a very, very narrow kind of key product insight that, okay, this problem needs an immediate, urgent solution, and we will solve it right away. That was not the path that NetSpring as a company took. We started broad, and we built something with the conviction that we are sure we'll find a good use case for it. Nobody has built tech like this, and let's see what the market tells us. And then we dabbled in a bunch of different verticals, and we realized that this is the place to be. And so that's been the path of the company. So in terms of evolution of goals, I mean, goal has been to, like, I almost view it as a hourglass type thing. So we start very broad in terms of the tech that we build, then we adapt that tech to a narrow use case. Right now we are in that phase of the company, and eventually, as we find success there, we expand again into a broader set of use cases. And that is where the investments that we have made in terms of building a very powerful and generic platform will actually pay off, because we'll find it much easier to expand into adjacent use cases than other products might.
And so for teams who are adopting NetSpring and they want to be able to integrate it into their existing data warehouse, their existing data models, I'm wondering if you can talk through some of the process of getting set up with NetSpring and starting to work through that analytical process of understanding, okay, these are the data models that we have. We need to maybe add some more detail to the domain objects that we're representing within these models, or add some more detail to the events that we're capturing, and start to build out the informational assets that are necessary for NetSpring to be able to properly visualize and dimensionalize the different actors and events that are happening.
Absolutely. So let me answer it for two class of customers separately. So there is the enterprise customer where the process is a little bit more complicated. So I come to that later. But let's start with a small, nimble company. Literally, all we will need to get started with them is just some JDBC credentials to their warehouse. And assuming that they have done the necessary instrumentation work, like integrating a library like Segment or Rudderstack into their product, we can get started right away. One of our product principles is zero to wow in 1 hour, and we live by that, and we feel uh, given the right circumstances coming from the customer, we are able to deliver on that promise. What we do advise against for companies to do is to stay away from proprietary instrumentation SDKs like Amplitude and Mixpanel, because the incentives of that SDK are to put you into their ecosystem and make it difficult to get out. So as long as you are using a vendor neutral SDK, it's easy enough for us to get started. Right now, the process is fundamentally the same even at larger companies, but as you know, with the larger transactions there come other complications. So with the enterprise customer, we have to, they usually have like a sprawling data lake or a warehouse, hundreds to thousands of data sets. Just navigating that environment and figuring out who has the knowledge about the use case that we are working on is itself a challenge. And then we have to negotiate things like, what are the data sets that NetSpring should have access to, what level of access should we have, what should the size of warehouse be. And these questions are usually resolved as part of a POC process, which takes about 2 weeks to a month, or a little bit more than that.
And as far as the types of signals that are kind of required for NetSpring to be able to operate most effectively, you mentioned that you have this concept of actors and events, and I'm wondering if you can talk to some of the common kind of data modeling activities that are necessary to be able to allow NetSpring to be able to understand what are some of the ways that we want to proactively, prefetch some of this information and pre-aggregate this information, versus the kind of naive approach of these are the objects, but NetSpring doesn't have enough context about how they're being used or how the different actors relate to each other to be able to provide a complete view of that product.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'll kind of go into what is required to onboard a new customer, and I lay out the journey from decision to use NetSpring to the first insight. So the steps that need to happen are, we have this concept of an organization, which is basically usually one-to-one mapping with a customer. So you have to create an organization. Within our organization, there can be multiple applications. So application is a NetSpring concept that represents an isolated use case within a customer. So you would typically create one application. All of this can be done through the UI. Then once you've created an application, within an application, you start with establishing a connection. A connection is a set of credentials to a warehouse. So every warehouse has different credentials. We work with all the major ones. And so you can create a connection, and that allows you to browse the warehouse and see what data is in there, obviously under the constraints of whatever level of access those credentials provide. Then we start this process of data mapping. So data mapping essentially says, you can see, let's say, hundreds of data sets in the underlying warehouse. It is unlikely that on day one you can do something useful with all 100, right? And our recommendation is always to start small, start with some narrow use case that is good for that has clear business value and good proving point for the value of NetSpring to the customer. So So this process of data mapping basically says, uh, you have this data set. This stores events that are generated from, let's say, segment. So map it into the system. It's not some week long process. You can do it in minutes. And at that point, events are visible in NetSpring. Then you say, okay, where is your users data set? You say, okay, this is, let's map that over. So in maybe another 30, 40 minutes or so, you have mapped all the first important data sets that you wanted to bring into the system. And at that point, you've basically done the onboarding that you wanted to do. You can start now visualizing these things using our various charting templates. You can understand retention of users. You can break up users by the kind of events that they are doing. That's typically called event segmentation in this world. You can build funnels to understand how people are dropping off between salient points, or you can do free-form browsing in the form of path analysis, which allows you to see the sequence of events that people are doing. So those are the kind of main behavioral analytic uh, templates or reports, so to speak. Then there is the free form, because as I said earlier, we bring the best of BI and the best of product analytics into one place, right? So we also have a free form exploration called visual exploration, where you can just do arbitrary slice and dice in a way that I've not seen amplitude and mixed panel support. Now they're going in that direction with some of their SQL capabilities that are being introduced. But my assessment of our freeform analytics, which allow you to do arbitrary slice and dice, is far stronger than what I've seen in other products so far.
And given that NetSpring itself is a product organization, you're selling the product of NetSpring, and you're building a product that is aimed at organizations that are themselves building products. I'm wondering, what are some of the ways that you're able to use your own platform and product to be able to help facilitate the continued evolution and implementation of the product that you're building?
Of course, I mean this is what you would expect us to do. So we do exactly that. We instrument our product using a variety of instrumentation libraries. We have done it through Snowplow, Segment, RudderStack. I mean, not because we need to analyze all three. It's that they're essentially the same data, but it gives us some understanding of how our customers might be using the product. Then we bring all that data into our Snowflake, and we look at it. And this dog fooding mentality allows us to keep our ears close to the ground, and we literally make daily improvements to our product. I mean, I truly believe that the big strength of a startup is that the round trip time between a customer and an engineer is very small, and tools like NetSpring allow us to keep it that way.
And in your experience of building the NetSpring platform and working with some of your customers, what are some of the most interesting or innovative or unexpected ways that you've seen it applied?
So I'll talk about two things that will perhaps showcase the analytical breadth of NetSpring. So one of our customers is using NetSpring to, so they are a crypto company, and so their use case involves understanding user events, user behavior in the product, which is the primary use case, but then also marry those events with data that sits on the blockchain. So what they do is they take the data in the blockchain, they move it into their warehouse using some kind of ETL pipeline, and so you have events and you have transactions on the blockchain, and then they do some kind of analysis that spans these two categories of data. So it's a true coming to life of our vision, where we said that not all the data is going to be in a product analytics provider, and the warehouse is the true center of gravity of enterprise data. And our recommendation is to put analytics on top of that. Another completely unrelated use case is we have a customer that uses us for, basically, because remember, we were built as an event analytics platform, which is much more general purpose than just product analytics. So we have a customer that uses us for understanding events in their IoT pipeline. So there is a big manufacturing plant that sends all kinds of data over, and they use NetSpring to generate alerts when something untoward happens, or the plant is not operating according to capacity. And so it shows you the power of the underlying technology, that you can take something like product analytics and you can take something like alerting in IoT and power both of those using the same basic platform.
And in your work and experience of building the NetSpring platform and business, what are some of the most interesting or unexpected or challenging lessons that you've learned?
So I think, I mean, for me, the whole experience around understanding how people are doing product analytics, what is best in class in terms of instrumentation and in terms of the kind of rigor that the like you look at some of these very advanced organizations who are at the forefront of using data to power their decisions. They are just so good at it. And my uh, aspiration is to allow everybody to become that good. Like, you take somebody like Airbnb and all these companies, Ubers of the world, they're so good at taking every single decision, consider it in isolation and optimize it to perfection. And many companies are not able to achieve that level of flawless execution. And I would like, it's my dream to be able to enable more companies to be able to do that. So in terms of learning, I truly learned like what the art of the possible is in this space. And I want to make it accessible to as many companies as possible.
And for people who are considering NetSpring and are facing their own challenges around product analytics, or they're just getting started on that journey, what are the cases where NetSpring is the wrong choice?
So clearly, if you're just getting started and you've not your requirements have not matured to a point where you're starting to feel these pains around cost and data access and governance of data, then like it's possible to argue that maybe you're better off starting with some simpler solution. So one can argue maybe it's not the right choice in those circumstances. If you don't have instrumentation, then you have bigger problems. Maybe you focus on getting your instrumentation right before you even have a conversation with us. So those are some areas that come to mind. But honestly, like, I'm having a hard time answering this question because like it has been our explicit goal to build NetSpring in a very generic and powerful way, right? And so I truly believe that there is such a wide variety of use cases that NetSpring is applicable to, that if you have a question that you have some event data in your business that you want to make sense of, NetSpring is probably the right tool for that.
And as you continue to build and iterate on the product and explore more of the overall problem space, what are some of the things you have planned for the near to medium term, or any particular projects that you're excited to dig into?
Absolutely. So the I'll kind of answer this in various parts. One of the core pieces of IP that we have developed is how to run product analytics on um, generic warehouses, right? And by generic, I mean not special purpose compute engines that are specially built for the problem of product analytics. So we have a stake in the ground right now in terms of system that works and is able to service things at a certain scale. But what does it mean to increase that scale 10x, 100x, and so on and so forth, right? So really, what I want to do in the near term is to keep pushing the boundaries of the kind of scale that NetSpring is able to support. And so that's one. Then the other area of immediate work for us is these our competitors have been around for a decade, and we are in many ways just starting out on this journey. And so obviously there are going to be product gaps in terms of the capabilities that other products support versus what we do. We have a pretty good understanding of those gaps. We feel that we have prioritized and gotten the most important pieces done already, but there is still a set of things that we need to go down and keep meeting our competitors in terms of different kind of analysis that they can do. So that's number two, right? And then more aspirationally, I feel that, like in terms of where I view the space going, I feel that this distinction between BI and product analytics is very artificial. I don't see. any reason for there to be two different products for solving these two very similar problems. The set of techniques we have around event analytics can be applied to, so many domains. Like if you are analyzing customer tickets, they are the same thing. Like, you create a ticket, then you assign it to somebody, maybe the thing gets resolved, reopened. So there are a lot of real world use cases beyond just product analytics where these event oriented analytical techniques can be very useful. Conversely, there are a lot of BI techniques like slicing and dicing and very powerful dashboarding that are very applicable in product analytics. Like what you'll often see is that BI tools are much more powerful in terms of dashboarding capabilities, visualization capabilities than product analytic tools are. And there is really no reason for this divide to exist. So my vision is that in some years from now, we won't be talking about these two separate categories. We'll be talking about one powerful analytics platform which is able to power both of these use cases. And the key problem to solve there is how do you manage all the power with the um, simple UX needs of the different end users. A person like a product manager is a very different persona than a data analyst and a data engineer. So, how do you keep people with such diverse skill sets happy in the same platform? I think the way forward is to have like these idea of these templates. Certain templated reports which only require a few point and click user inputs, even people with relatively low data skill can do. And then there is the more complicated parts of authoring freeform visualizations and all that perhaps only data engineers can do. So coming back to your question, like being able to find the right balance in terms of intuitive UX for this problem and eventually being able to offer a unified BI and product analytics product is really what I would like to be able to do over the next few years.
Are there any other aspects of the NetSpring product itself or the overall space of product analytics that we didn't discuss yet that you'd like to cover before we close out the show?
No, I think we had a fairly wide-ranging discussion. I'm not able to think of any specific things that we didn't touch upon.
Well, for anybody who wants to get in touch with you and follow along with the work you and your team are doing, I'll have you add your preferred contact information to the show notes. And as the final question, I'd like to get your perspective on what you see as being the biggest gap in the tooling or technology that's available for data management today.
See, we live in the era of chat GPT, right? And really, if you ask, I mean, the last few months have shown us like what is possible. And so I would say that what is possible is this super intelligent machine that's constantly watching over our data and telling us what we should know rather than us asking the question. So I feel tech has not evolved to the point where something like that is possible. I've seen some examples of people, auto-generating SQL queries through ChatGPT prompts, and I can already spot errors in the SQL and so on and so forth. So I don't think we are at that point yet, but I, at some point, I think we will get at that point. And so the big movement that can perhaps happen is this going from pull to push based consumption model of data. And what form that will take, I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you very much for taking the time today to join me and share the work that you and your team are doing at NetSpring. Simply a very interesting product and an interesting approach to this problem of product analytics. So it's definitely great to be seeing people leverage the new capabilities that we have from the technologies that are out there and being able to incorporate more data sources into this very necessary and challenging problem space. So I appreciate all of the time and energy that you and your team are putting into that. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me over, Tobias, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And I look forward to this coming on to the podcast channel.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out our other shows, Podcast.init, which covers the Python language, its community, and the innovative ways it is being used, and the Machine Learning Podcast, which helps you go from idea to production with machine learning. Visit the site at dataengineeringpodcast.com to subscribe to the show, sign up for the mailing list, and read the show notes. And if you've learned something or tried out a project from the show, then tell us about it. Email hosts@dataengineeringpodcast.com with your story. And to help other people find the show, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and tell your friends and coworkers.